All right. I'm excited. This is going to be first of many panel discussions. Really excited to bring to you some of the best leaders at LinkedIn. And the purpose of me creating this community is because, a lot of times, like when I look around, especially in sales management, you often don't see Asians and brown people in sales leadership roles. So I wanted to shed light into what that path is like, the lessons you've learned along the way, and maybe it'll inspire some of us to take that path instead of continuing as an intentional IC. So would love to for you just to do introductions, and yeah, this will be pretty conversational. You want to start us off, Vikram?
Sure. Yeah, I can start you guys. Start us off. Hi everyone, I'm Vikram. I manage a sales team that's a mix of AEs and RMs in our LinkedIn Canada office. I've been with LinkedIn now for about 8.5 years. Started off in the Toronto office, then in about 2014, moved over to the Melbourne office in Australia, then as an IC, and then transitioned to Sydney, where I moved into a management role, and then back to Toronto in 2018. I'll pass it off to Angelica.
Hi guys, Angelica Saini here. I am a manager in LSS in the New York City office. I manage our mid-market account executive team. Prior to that, I managed one of our SMB RM teams also in LSS in New York. And before that, so 3.5 years at LinkedIn, so not a vet like Vikram by any means, but I spent 12 years at American Express before that. So I'm pretty old, I guess. So excited to be here with everybody.
Rich?
Angelica, I am older than you, I think. So, I actually spent 8 years prior to coming. July 11th will be my 9th anniversary here at LinkedIn. So I've spent half my time here now, which is crazy, in LTS when I first came to LinkedIn. And then in the other half, I've been on the learning team. So moved over to learning when we acquired Linda. So right at that beginning of the transition. And then as of just a year now, at the end of this month will be 12 months as an SD outbound manager for learning. And I'm excited to be here. Davidson, thanks for setting this up.
Rule, do you want to go next?
Sure, sounds good. Hey everybody, my name is Rahul Mehta. I'm actually coming up on 8 years at LinkedIn next month. So been quite a ride. It's been a great experience. I've spent most of my time on the LMS side. I took a little break and went over to Elevate when that first launched. So that was exciting. Got to see the inception of that, and started my career as an AE, and then recently became a manager about a year ago. So it's been a great ride so far. And Davidson, to that point, thank you for setting this up. Really excited to be part of LIAA, and it's great to meet all of you.
Yeah, thank you. We'd love to hear why you've all decided to go into management. I'm sure there's a lot of putting out fires, and I'm sure there's a lot that you know now that maybe you wish you knew when before getting into it. I think that's always top of mind for people who are curious about getting into management one day.
I can start. No, we're never putting out fires, never. That's not part of our job. So how did I get into management? I noticed, and this is back when I was at Amex, that when I started getting more satisfaction out of working with my peers and helping others, that I think it was a good time for me to transition out of an IC role. So I think that was the key marker of like, oh, there's the thrill of the chase. but there's a certain type of satisfaction that comes from working with someone, even if it's not truly coaching, but just working with someone. So I wanted to push myself, figured that was a good tipping point. And frankly, there's no good time ever. So a little bit of it was, you're never fully ready. You just gotta take the plunge.
I can go next. I think very similar, right? I think at a certain point, you think of leadership as an opportunity to take, and then understanding that when you're doing it, like that's, at least for me, it's like servant leadership. It's like it's really working with others and enjoying other people's success and helping them guide them to it. Just kind of, for me, the way I look at it too, it's like I'm new to it, but the way when I think about it is like I want to be everything like every great leader has been for me, and like a lot of that's like trust and treating adults. See how that plays out. I think this first year it's been fun just to identify what that leadership philosophy is and see it come to fruition. And there's times that I've succeeded, and there's times that I definitely failed, and things I could have done better. But I agree, it's just really understanding that you really want to see people succeed and really help them get there. I think that's the joy about being in this role. And if you don't enjoy that, then I don't think it's a great role to be in.
Yeah, these are, I guess I'll chime in. I mean, these are great answers, and it's hard to really deviate from what you guys are saying, but I agree. I think, I definitely, now that I'm a manager, I kind of reflect back on being an IC and maybe some of the pain I caused my managers in the past, and it's definitely coming full circle. But I do think, Richard, to your point, what I love most about the job is, yeah, there's definitely tough days, there's definitely fires to put out, and there's things, but if you can really take joy from seeing other people succeed, and you get to, you're happy when someone else is up front and getting those kind of accolades, then you're in the right role. And it's been really fulfilling, and I find myself more and more as time goes on just enjoying seeing my team do well and seeing them happy when they're crushing it. And the other side too is, it's, as a coach, it's nice to be able to help people who are struggling and put them in a position to be successful. So I think those are the things about management that have really, that I've really grown to love. And obviously I'm very new to the game, about 8 or 9 months in, so maybe I have a lot more to learn, but so far it's been a great experience.
Awesome. Probably not too much for me to add there. I think the theme strikes true for me as well, which was, it naturally happened where, as an IC, you were seeing a level of success, and you start to help your peers. You start to feel really good when they succeed. But the other point I'll make, just not to repeat the previous ones, is that I didn't become a manager the first time I wanted to become a manager. It was a pretty long journey. I think I got turned down for at least, I want to say like three and a half roles before I actually became a manager at LinkedIn. So as much, and I think a lot of that was my naivety around what and to what a lot of people have referred to is what the management role actually, or leadership role, or people leadership role actually entails, right? So I thought that I was ready because I was answering a lot of my peers' questions, and I was able to help them out with sales cycles. But there's a lot more in terms of leadership that's required from you as an IC before you're actually ready to lead other individuals.
Yeah, that's a good segue to my next question. So what's something that you wish you knew as an IC that you've learned now that you're actually in the role and that you're like well into it? Like, what advice would you give yourself in your earlier stages?
I think for me, like kind of like thinking about people that would want to transition from IT to leadership, it's like there's like a complexity. Like I think kind of Vikram, what you're talking about, like I didn't get the first like leadership role that I went for as well, and I think it's like there's a complexity to it that you don't quite understand until you learn? Or I feel like at first I always thought like in sales, it was always like a meritocracy, right? You're like on the top of the stack rank. You are a good person. You are getting leadership and leverage. That why wouldn't you be the first thought person to be like to take over like a leadership position, right? But then on the other hand, there's like the whole networking and getting advocates, getting sponsors, and all these things that if I would look back at it again, I wouldn't focus just on like, hey, look at me, I'm like going to club or whatever it is, I'm like top of the stack rank. I should get the role. And then if you don't get the role, you feel a little animosity, right? Like, well, like I'm crushing it. Why wouldn't I get the role? And then you understand that there's a lot more that goes into that process than just being like a top salesperson. And I think that's something that it took me some time to understand. And I think once I did understand that and understand, like, I guess like you'd say, like play the game, like it's not really just a game, but there is that need, right? People need to know more than just that, you know, you're going to be the person that's consistently going to succeed in results. And I think for me, that's one thing that it took some time to understand. And once I did, and I went about it again, it was a totally different experience than the first time where I just came in with like just my stats. I'm like, look at my baseball card, you got to hire me. And that just didn't work. And I think the second time it came around, and just like learned from my peers and had those like kind of conversations, that I felt much more confident in that interview process as well. Whereas the first time I felt confident, but it was like a false sense of confidence. Where the second time, I'm like, shit, I did it. Like I have like a great baseball card, and like I know who the owners are. I like you know, shook their hands, like got to know them better. And the second time around, I felt much more confident that I was the right candidate, and it kind of alignment happened.
I can share something that I thought I felt like I learned early in my management career, which is like sometimes you have to let your team really fail and you can't do everything for your team. And I think most of us are probably ex-ICs, right? And so we're, to Rich's point, like you're used to crushing it. And so the first thing I came in was like, tried to save the day for most of my team. Deal falls through. I'm on the call. I'm in Salesforce. And it's just possibly the worst thing that you can do for your team. And so I think there's a place in time for leading versus like being a coach, or teaching versus coaching. But I think, you know, very early on in most managers' roles, they'll try to do everything for their reps, thinking it's going to help them. And in the long run, it can really impact you as the manager, and it can really impact the relationship with your reps, because there's just becomes this dynamic that, you know, they expect a certain type of support. So usually it's trial by fire, but definitely something I learned early on.
Yeah. I'd say in terms of like giving myself advice, what I see a lot of ICs do when they're looking to get into management is that, you know, they do a lot of the networking, they've helped their peers out a lot, and a lot of that is deal level coaching. And so, you know, there's definitely an element to of the leadership role or a management role where you have to be really good at helping somebody close a deal. But the thing that people don't realize is that there's also the element of coaching people. And what I mean by that is, oftentimes as an IC, you only see it from an IC's perspective. So I think like Rich sort of alluded to that, which is, hey, like, why not? Like, it's an objective game. Like you know, I went to club, I hit these numbers. I am the best at this, or you should listen to me, or this should be the next outcome. Versus when it comes to, you know, coaching people, it's taking the opportunity to talk one of your colleagues off the ledge when there's a organizational change. It's speaking up in a team meeting where you're trying to take the perspective of, hey, like, you know, why is my company making this decision, or why is my manager asking this of me? It's, you know, taking that extra effort to think about things from the other side, and to think about things not as a like IC versus company or IC versus manager, but to help your team move through the change management cycle or the change management curve whenever there's something, you know, that either your, you know, one of your peers or one of your team is dealing with, or your team as a whole is dealing with. So I think once you start to get into the practice of bringing that mindset to the table, what I realized for myself and some of my peers that have moved into management is that their managers started to notice that a lot more. Their managers started to go, okay, well, hey, this person's a leader on the team, not just from a, if you need help, go talk to Vic about, like what to do in this specific deal. But they know that if they weren't in the room, the team would be in a good place culturally and mentally, regardless of, or because you're on the team with them. So I think that's a huge element when people are thinking about who they want to promote and who they see as leaders that they want to bring up in their org.
Yeah, I think if I would say first off, this is very therapeutic. This is actually great to hear from the other panelists because I'm like, wow, okay, good. Everyone else went through the same thing. This is nice to hear. I also, if I was to give myself advice, knowing what I know now, I mean, obviously everything you guys said is spot on, and I agree. I think the appreciating and paying attention to details in the process, right? Like to your point about the baseball cards and the stats, like, yeah, I went to club, I had this goal, I did this. But, in a lot of instances, I think as managers, we also realize like sometimes it's you're at the right place at the right time as an AE. You get the right book or you get the right opportunity. And, so you can't really judge someone just on their performance. It's how did they approach the book? How do they work with others? How do they inform their managers? Do they take learnings from what they were doing and share it with the rest of the team to put others in a position to be successful? So I think recognizing that, if you want to be a leader, it's not just, while AEs or sometimes individuals get a lot of the credit, there's a lot of people behind their success. And if you can work with them on that and get them to acknowledge that and appreciate other people and share their process, I think you find a lot more success, and you find a lot more enjoyment in your job.
Thank you for that. And Sam, thanks for joining us. We'd love a quick introduction if you want to introduce yourself to everyone.
Yeah, you got it. Davidson, first and foremost, thank you and the Leah Group for putting this together. Apologies for being a few minutes late. I had to jump into something that was not able to be shifted. Let me put it that way. But Sam Patel, I lead our nonprofit AE business for Namer. I have the pleasure of serving 7 SMB and 3 enterprise reps that sell LTS, LSS, and a part of LMS. Happy to be here today.
Glad to have you. So we were just talking about advice. What advice would you give yourself at the beginning of being a manager? So for people that are interested in taking that next step, what some reflective thoughts on that. So just if you want to chime in, I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but I'm sure you have a lot to say about that as well.
Yeah, no worries, man. We're getting into the deep end here. What I have to share about going into leadership, I would say that don't do leadership if you think it's the next step in your career, right? A lot of times people are often at the point where, hey, now I've been a 4 or 3 or even a 2 at the IC level here at LinkedIn, of course. And they think that the very next step is, all right, now I need to move into management because that's going to show growth in my career trajectory, right? I think oftentimes you're able to not only build up the skills, but also be able to make an immense, if not even a larger impact at the IC level, right? You should consider leadership if you fundamentally are aware of your core values, you have your principles, and you're able to then say, all right, what am I really in this for, right? For me personally, the reason why I went into leadership was an opportunity to be able to serve people. And as an IC, the more I leaned into that, I found that I was finding energy. And one thing led to another, and the opportunity came to move into a world where I have the ability to serve folks. So my advice would be, think about it, try it out in a low risk environment, coach people, mentor people, run some team meetings for your frontline manager, whatever that may look like, be a guest manager, and really establish why you'd want to move into a position where you're responsible for so many individuals on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, and then for tactical advice, if someone's actually moving into frontline management, I would say like time management was a shit show. Like the first few months, I was like unable to figure out how to manage my calendar. So if there's any advice, take like a LinkedIn course or lean on some frontline managers that have done this in the past. But I would say I struggled with time management for sure at the onset.
That's great advice. Thank you. On the lighter note, I often hear, going into management, a lot of times you're taking a pay cut for being a rock star IC. So how does one know what's, hey, is it worth it for being of service and having more impact, I guess, from that lens versus like, I'm just going to make a ton of money and just be rich and buy a ton of houses or whatever you choose to do with your money.
Don't go into leadership if you want a lot of money. At least frontline leadership. Sorry to tell you guys.
That's a fun question. A lot of houses sounds nice, Davidson. Not gonna lie. I would say plus one to the voice that just spoke. Apologies, didn't know who that was, but yeah, don't. If money's your driving factor, I'd say you probably need to write down again what inspires you and what it is that you really find purpose in, because monetary compensation is very much just a short-term motivation. It's not true inspiration, and I think in the journey of leadership, right, you have to find ways to be able to build on the inspiration that you have within, and more often than not that comes from the people that you serve and the impact that you're creating right day to day. And I think that as a leader that outweighs the monetary compensation significantly.
I'd agree. I'd say there's always ways to make money. There's a million different ways you can continue to make a ton of money, right? So it's the same advice that I give to a lot of people that were trying to figure out whether or not to go from A1 to 2 because the one quotas looked amazing and they had a bunch of pilot renewals coming up, right? So they turned down 2 positions, and then 3 years later they're still a 1, right? And now they're struggling to go to a 2 for whatever reason. So I think you really have to dig into, why is it, your motivations, your values, and figure out like, hey, like what do I really want to achieve here? It may not be 5 years from now if you don't know that, but what gives you that energy and that inspiration? Because if it's money, then yeah, you'll continue to go down the money path, but there's no guarantee that you'll continue to make that type of money in whatever role that you're in. So yeah, same advice I'd give to anyone.
Yeah, I agree. It's like, I guess you're not in it for like the accelerators and the money, but it's like, I think the main thing is like, are you ready to make that transition in your career into leadership? If that's something you want to do, right? If you want to stay in IC forever, like that's totally cool. And there's never going to need to be like, at some point you need to be in leadership. I think for me, there's a certain part where I wanted to get into leadership. So when I made that transition, it's like, now I'm in it, right? One, it's like I got 1 year under the belt and I didn't fuck it up and I feel pretty good. So like we're really good to go. But the thing is that when I made that transition, I was all in, right? I wasn't thinking about the deals that I like was leaving on the table. I wasn't thinking about like all the things that I was walking away from. I was thinking like, cool, like I'm ready to get into leadership. I'm going to give it 100 and whatever percent. And I want to see what this journey takes me. And I just started it. So I'm feeling good about it. I want to continue doing it, but it is like a paradigm shift in your philosophy of thought, right? Like you're not staying in this role for the money. You're doing it for 1, to get into leadership, and 2, to grow. And who knows, maybe a couple of years from now, like I transition and I don't think this is what I want to be. But right now, like I'm not looking back. And I think that was for me. It's like, if you're doing this, like you can't look back. You can't like see like, because like I'm in that first year, right? So I saw all these deals that like I got to the finish line, I couldn't close last year, and I'm like, dang. But I'm like, no, can't think about that. You made the decision, like move forward. Like this is your new journey, this is your new path, and just see where we go.
Yeah, so silver lining, there's hope. My best ever paycheck at LinkedIn was as a manager, so got lucky, but it can happen.
That's awesome. I'm curious as to more of the diversity and diversity hiring aspect of being a manager. You know, I hear it's often lonely at the top. Would love to hear just your thoughts on, you know, how can we have the value of hiring diverse teams and how we can empower some of you know, our counterparts in thinking about hiring different types of people on your team.
I'll start with that. I think, you know, it's, if you want to have a successful team, having diverse thinking on your team when you have those group settings is critical to everybody's success. And if you find yourself hiring the same person over and over again, you're not doing yourself any favors, and you're not doing your team any favors. And it really stifles how the team is going to grow and how the team is going to think. You know, I think sometimes it's not so much about, you know, sometimes it's not healthy when everyone on the team is in agreement or everyone on the team is seeing the same thing. Like, you want people to disagree with you. You want someone to think about things differently, to kind of question why you're doing things. Because if everyone just does what they're being told, then there's a good chance you're missing out on some real opportunities. I think the more diversity you can bring to your team, the more diverse thinking you can bring, and the more you can kind of create that forum for people to feel comfortable being themselves, sharing their thoughts, the more opportunities I think arise. And I also think, you know, while we're ICs, or while our team is filled with ICs, you know, when your ICs are collaborating together and talking, that's powerful. And that means as a manager, you're doing a good job because they feel comfortable helping support each other, because you're not going to have all the answers. I don't think the goal is to have all the answers. And I think the more people are communicating and sharing and talking and having diverse thoughts and bringing their thinking to the table, the more your team will flourish.
I agree with that. Like, I strive to like want a diverse team. I've already tried to bring in diversity in thought, diversity in color, diversity in gender. You know, all those things I embrace on the team. I think that's important. And yeah, like looking at just this group that we're talking to today, it's like I would love to see more East Asians, South Asians in leadership positions with me, because like, you know, there's a guy who's on the call. He's in Chicago, Ebad, who joined the same like leadership team with me, and like immediately it's just like I have a lot of like India and South like Asian friends, so it's like it's cool that like kind of like it's like college again. Like you get like you kind of gravitate, and like it's cool to see people in similar positions, and like I would love if I could be an advocate and promote that, right? So I think it's important. And I think like there's this thing that my wife taught me. She's like an executive headhunter. It's like there's this like leaky pipeline, right? And it's like you hire these people from different like, you know, diverse groups, and throughout the process they start dripping out because there's not people that look like them in those different levels, right? So if we can advocate for people, it doesn't have to be, you know, yellow and brown people, although like, you know, but like the thing is like I like if it's like any other like color, people of color, it's important, right? That we, as long as they're like, you know, they're good people and like they do the job well and like live by the culture and standards of LinkedIn, we should be the people that help advocate them. And I think that's important. And I think for me in leadership, I'm going to try to do that wholeheartedly, because like I think there needs to be more of that. There's a very homogeneous type of culture in Chicago, and I think we can mix that up a little bit.
Yeah, I'd plus one that I think it's kind of like the see something, say something. And I think that we're not all there yet where we're saying something. So as ICs, as managers, we all need to be saying things when we notice that there's not diversity. And then I think the other thing that's really important, and this has to happen at all levels, but is we all need to play a part, but we all need to, you know, kind of surround ourselves with people that are not afraid of confronting the lack of diversity. That goes to saying something, but you know, you have to be able to do some self-introspection, especially as managers. We have to be able to say, how diverse are our teams? What are the opportunities? But it's also about who around you is going to do that kind of poking for you as well. So, and that's important kind of up and down the chain.
Yeah, I'd say a huge plus one to that, and to everything that was said before this. So there's, I think about diversity in the visible diversity as one category, and then the diversity of thought and experience as the second category. So the the thing that I think, firstly, like, thank you for putting this together, because I think this is one of the first steps to ensuring that people can see that, hey, like, if I want to go down the management path, there are people that look like me, sound like me, that have had a similar lived experience to me, that I can relate to, and I can just communicate with a lot easier as a starting point. Like, Richard, like you said, if it just feels easier to have that conversation when there's more common ground, like outside of work, that you can connect on. So that's the first piece, is making sure that you're tapping into a community like this. And so thank you for putting this together. The second piece to what Angelica was saying around speaking up is to just, firstly, I think as ICs or even as managers, like, educate yourself as to, what it takes to create diverse teams. And a lot of it comes down to very tactical things. A lot of it comes down to, training yourself to weed out unconscious bias. A lot of it comes down to the hiring practices and the networking practices that we need to be intentional about. So, an example of something that we do in LTS in Canada is that we make sure that we have multiple people, multiple managers and reps involved in a panel interview for every single person that we hire, right? We try to mix it up by gender. We try to mix it up by, like, different levels. So if I'm hiring for a mid-market rep, I might have an enterprise manager sit on the interview with me, and vice versa. So that's something that we try and do. The second thing, and the reason I'm sharing this is so that, as even as ICs, you can start to ask your managers whether or not they're doing these types of things. And as managers, talk to your TA partners on how they can help you, like, start to include more inclusive and diverse hiring practices, because that'll start to fill up the funnel on the bottom end, at least. And so the second thing to that is making sure that you have an objective scorecard. So a lot of bias can creep back in, even if you do have a panel interviewing somebody, if there's one voice that's louder than the other. If one person goes, okay, well, two people said this, so I'll just agree with you, versus if they have an objective scorecard where they're just each inputting their evaluation of the candidate individually, then when they come together to talk, there's no adjustment of your opinion, if you will. So you do bring a more unbiased view to how you're able to hire more diverse individuals into your team. And those are both really good places to start. I'd say the other place to everyone should be looking is go/dibs, essentially. Talk to anyone that's involved in the ERGs. Talk to anyone that's involved in the dibs group. Rosanna's town hall on Friday, I didn't even know this, but we have somebody that's in charge of the hire pillar for dibs, and their job is to make sure that we're doing all of the things that or some of the things that I just mentioned. So feel free to reach out to those individuals to ask them questions, because the other thing that you'll find is that there is, from a diversity standpoint, you're going to see a lot of people that have naturally now made it to that first level of management. So as you can see on this call, there are a lot of people that look like you, sound like you, that are in the first level of management. But the higher and higher up you look, it goes back to that more traditional white male stereotype that we've seen. So continue to move that, or continue to question and ask questions of people that are above you, even if it's like skip levels and 2 levels up.
What advice would you give to, because many of us are ICs on the call, when you see a microaggression, whether it's towards you or someone that's of color, how would you suggest bringing that up to whoever it is, whether it's a teammate or if you just see it at LinkedIn or outside of LinkedIn? I'm sure that this happens like all the time, and I feel like, for instance, like if you're new to the company, maybe you don't feel comfortable enough to challenge, to bring this up because, you're afraid of, something might happen to you.
I think you just say something, right? I mean, and like I've been around for a while, so I feel like I have a little bit more cred to tell people they know who I am. So like I feel I have a little bit more confidence. But in all reality, if something doesn't, sound right, smell right, then say something. It's like, even if it's like as simple, like the most minor of a microaggression still has a big impact, right? So if you holler about it and you're coming from a good place, you're not coming from a place like you're a terrible person because you said that, but just like say, I don't know if that's like a really appropriate thing to say. Like, and so someone can like kind of think about it, reflect about it, and just kind of gather what they say. If they're like combative, then you're like, whoa, maybe this person isn't the best person to have this conversation with, and like maybe I'd be able to educate them. But most people at LinkedIn, I feel like, are super cool and super open. They're like, they'll say like, I'm sorry, I didn't know that that was a microaggression, or that hurt you, or set off something that wasn't right. And I think most people will be responsive to that. So I think it's more of the fear of not saying it because you're worried about what people are going to say or do. I think if you say it, I think you'll be surprised that most people are going to be pretty receptive and willing to listen and change.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you all about, I think a lot of us, it's hard to balance like the old school, like the more traditional, like Eastern values versus like the Western values that you have in America and Namer, and especially like in sales. What are your thoughts on still being authentic but still being true to yourself, but still being able to adapt to your colleagues around you that might look different or might come from different backgrounds or upbringings?
Davis, I thought it was a really good question. This is my opinion, of course. I actually try not to see them as conflicts, and rather try to see how Eastern values could actually support oneself in sales. So for example, at least as a South Asian, I think this is for most Eastern cultures, the concept of respect is like very top of mind, very ingrained culturally. And like how I see that play out is, again, and I may be generalizing, but like many Asians using that really well in terms of listening to customers, right? So it's like a sign of respect that they listen and like truly get to know the other individual. So I think, first getting out of the mindset that you have to have this like Western sales approach is the first step. But then secondly, seeing things that are ingrained in maybe our cultures is positives, and something that maybe a typical Western sales individual might not have, that kind of like aggressive let's call it aggressive, pushy, typically white male style. So I think just kind of coming to that determination of like, what are things that you hold authentic to yourself? How can they be really used to good in your sales career?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think there's an opportunity too when you talk about East, what it's like from the East and the West, and how we have different, maybe different approaches. But I do think the goal should be to find a commonality. And I think as sales, wherever you're selling around the world, you're selling a solution. Someone is giving you money to solve a problem. And at the end of the day, like whatever language you speak, whatever you're doing, that's the goal, right? Like no one, maybe you have some relationships where people throw you a little more money because they like you, whatever. But at the end of the day, fundamentally, you're solving a problem. And ideally with your sales, that whatever you're selling, you're bringing people together. You're helping position either a company or a person in a position, to put them in a position to be successful. And I think when you think of it like that, it becomes less about, the cultural approaches to things, but more about fundamentally, what are we trying to do? But I do think it's important to keep in mind, like people come from different backgrounds, wherever in Asia you are, whatever part of Asia you associate yourself with, We've all been raised a little differently. Maybe we have some similar fundamental values, but I think just being respectful of that, whether, you're Chinese, Korean, Indian, whatever, at the end of the day, we were all raised a little differently, but we can all appreciate where we come from and where our families come from. And I think just having that level of respect to everybody goes a long way.
Hi, Davidson. My name is Ibad. I just wanted to share some feedback on the combination of East versus West. I manage an LTS team kind of in a similar peer role as Rich. And I joined LinkedIn about a year ago. And in my second team meeting, I had somebody on my team that had their feet up on the table through an hour-long meeting as a whole team. And growing up in India, an Indian background or being Desi, I always felt like there's a certain level of respect when you have your teammates or elders and you have your feet, up on a table. And it was only my second week at LinkedIn, but I waited till I had a one-on-one with that person. And that person on my team was actually the leader of my team results-wise, top of the board. And we had a very open conversation, and it really came down to exposure, experience, and education. And when we kind of stepped back and talked a little bit about this person's goals and IQ versus EQ, it really it really opened or shined a light for that person, and they really understood and actually went even further in that capacity to think about what they could do next time and how to be more aware and self-conscious in that matter. So that was just a little story about East versus West and at LinkedIn. So I thought I'd share that.
That's a great story. Yeah, a huge plus one to what everyone's saying. I think there's a difference between sacrificing your values versus like adapting to what your customers or your audience requires, right? So I'd say I think the core thing that everyone's saying here is that you don't have to sacrifice your values and what makes you you. But there's definitely an element of adaptability that plays into everything. So I mean, I'd say it's not even just East versus West, right? Like you think about, like we're up here in Canada, and our Canadian buyers think very differently than American buyers do. When I sold in Australia, that they were way more relationship based versus another country where buyers typically might tend to be more price sensitive. So as a salesperson, I mean, that's to Raul's point. Like all you have to do is figure out what your audience cares about, and then the good salespeople start to tap into how can I speak their language. But to Angelica's point and what Ibad was saying as well, you can still do it while upholding your cultures and your principles and what you essentially what makes you you. So it doesn't have to be a trade-off. There's a place for both.
Hey, Davidson, I'm not sure. Do we have any, do other folks have any questions that they wanted to ask too?
Yeah, I was going to leave the last, so let's do closing remarks for the last, everyone could do closing remarks, and we'll leave the last 10 minutes for Q&A. So yeah, if you all want to maybe just summarize, what's one thing that you want to take away from this conversation as an IC, and then if each of you could spend maybe 30 seconds or a minute sharing that, and then we'll go into questions.
Okay, so I'll give it a shot. Didn't really have a good closing remark prepared, but I would say this is awesome, and I think with everything going on in the world right now, between COVID, the Black Lives Matter movement, I think it's really important that as a minority group, we do our part to support each other, support others. I think a lot of us can definitely appreciate that, or at least I can definitely say, I would never have been in this position today had people not taken a chance on me, made time for me, been inconvenienced by me to help me. And I think it's important that we think about how fortunate we are and how important it is to give back right now to the community and to help others. We really are an amazing company that promotes diversity, difference in thought. And I think it's really important that we lean in during this time. And I think with the organization that we formed, it's just such a great first step, and I'm just really thrilled to be part of it and to meet all you guys. And I think we just have to keep this momentum going and support those that need our help right now.
Yeah, plus one. Again, Davidson, thanks for setting this up. I think I would have loved this when I was like looking to explore a management opportunity. When I had first pursued them, like everyone said multiple times before getting the first role. I think, plus one to Rahul's point, I think my one takeaway is that like everyone has a part to play, which is funny because tomorrow's play your part. But I think that, when we think about diversity in the workforce and also just understanding and appreciating diverse thought, diversity and experience, everyone has a responsibility, right? So as managers, we have a responsibility to be making sure that, like we talked about, our teams are not one voice. As ICs, people have a responsibility to say, hey, like I've heard something, I'm going to address it, or hey, manager, or hey, director, or hey, VP, there are things that I've noticed that don't seem to be in line with, actually like walking the talk. So I think that, one thing I'd ask for everybody to think about is like, what is the part that you are committing to play in general for diversity that includes like Black Lives Movement, as well as just diversity for this particular Asian subgroup.
I agree with everything that both you guys said. And I think that, Davidson, thanks for setting this up. And not to repeat the great things you said, just like, I think here, we're unique. We're at LinkedIn. And if you look at the 30 or so people that are on this call, and we're all Asian, we have like a big network. And I think, I don't know if I know a lot of you guys very well, or I've met you in person, or I've met you like in a meeting. I think this is an opportunity to take a look at this list that Davidson has amassed and start, reaching out to people and understanding their story. And, wherever they are, if they're if they're a leader or if they're an IC, just start to learn more about what they do at LinkedIn. Like, where do you want to strive to be if you're, younger in your career, or if you're older in your career? Start finding people. And I think, I don't know, when I first came to LinkedIn, I was the only East Asian in the Chicago office, albeit there's only like 50 people when I first started. But even then, it took a while to start seeing people that looked like me in the office. And even then, it's still pretty sparse. So like, I was talking on that meeting on Tuesday, whenever like the previous company I was at, if I saw an Asian and like, I didn't even know if I liked the person, but I was like, we're going to be tight because we're Asian. And I feel like I have to we have to help each other out. I think that's one of the things that it's important that like, we do have this network. Try not to walk away from it, actually embrace it. I think that's important. And I think some people sometimes like try not to embrace it because like, oh, maybe I don't want to like involve myself with Asian. I want to like go with like more of the norm. Like, you can do both, right? And I think it's good to have people like us in this group that will tell you like, how it is for real. And like, if you guys ever want to reach out to me, I was like, I'm pretty like I wear my personality on my sleeve, so I'll just tell you how it is. I'm almost too open, so feel free to reach out if you want.
I want to hear from Sam Patel.
Oh, thank you, Vic. I would echo everything that everyone said, leading from all the way when you asked about the values and also the diversity piece, since I didn't have an input there. I want to say that regardless of the level that you're in at LinkedIn, right, it's irrelevant, right? Each one of us plays a really important part in being able to build a company that's diverse, inclusive, and creates a culture of belonging, right? And if you ever find yourself in a position where you feel like someone has done something to consciously or unconsciously, you have to speak up. Like, that's our obligation, right? If we're really going to make a change. And I'll add this, like, as far as we've come, we have a very long road ahead of us, right? So just know that we're taking steps every single day, but this is a long journey, right? And don't think for a second, if you're a SD or a one or for a director, your voice carries the same weight, right? So speak up, right? And as far as this entire setting goes, I mean, this is awesome. Davidson, when you sent that email, and I was like, dude, spot on, man. So yeah, I mean, I honestly didn't know there were this many Asians at LinkedIn in sales, to be honest with you, before today's meeting. So it's great to see everyone's faces that's on VC. And similar to what Rich said, if there's anything that anyone needs, don't hesitate, right? We're a family, so ping me or ping Vic. I know Vic's always ready to help as well. So great seeing everyone. Excited for the future of this ERG, and happy to be here.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just, the only thing I'm going to add to what everyone said is exactly what actually Sam also already said, which is if anyone has any questions, if anyone wants any guidance, advice, feel free to reach out to me. This is an amazing community, but all of us here that are, you know, I think all of us are going to be open to talking to you, and my audio is terrible, someone's telling me. Sorry, my laptop died. Reach out to me if you have any questions or if you need any help. I'll end there.
Thank you, everyone. That's awesome. So we have about 7 minutes for Q&A. If anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself.
I'll go, guys. Hey, guys, Vishu here. I'm an LTS RM out of New York. Davidson, you know how I feel about this entire forum. I'm so happy that we have a community just for us Asians. I just feel like we're already a community when we see another Indian person or an Asian person, so it's super cool to see all these faces. I wanted to just comment on Angelica's comment on dibs. One of the things that I started with my team, I heard Carla Harris say that you can lead from any seat. And given everything that's happening with Black Lives Matter, I feel like this is a period to continue our education, not just be a fad for like the next 30 days. So I challenged my manager to block out 10 minutes for an inclusive corner at every team meeting. And I think that would be an awesome opportunity to have one person on your team take an initiative to even talk about an ERG, a recent event, community events, do like a video from YouTube, whatever that case would be. But I think that's a great idea for managers on here to include in their agenda, but also the ICs to bring to their teams to keep the DIBS initiative running for the rest of our time at LinkedIn. So I just wanted to quickly just share that. But I'm really excited for this forum. It was awesome to see all of you guys.
Does anyone have any comments or any questions at all? All right, well, did someone have a question?
No, I said quiet group today.
Yeah, I guess the last question I have for you all is, we're thinking about creating a mentorship community, right? So, you know, ones get paired with twos, threes get paired with fours, and, you know, maybe fives get paired with managers. Would you all be down for that? And what else do you want to see from programming in regards to Asians in sales, the Asians in sales community at LinkedIn?
Yeah, it's a great idea. I think mentoring is obviously something that all of us have probably benefited from at one point or the other. And if it's an opportunity for us to give back to our own community, I'm 100% in. I think it's a great idea.
I'll echo that sentiment, Davidson. I think it's a wonderful idea. And thank you for taking the lead on it as well.
All right. It looks like no one has any additional questions. Well, thank you all for taking the time. You know, I know it's the end of year. You know, let's crush it. Hope everyone has an amazing end of year. And yeah, what I'm getting from this conversation is that you're all approachable, right? You're all reachable. Now that we know that each other exists, I think that's like the first step. And it sounds like you're all pretty open to, individual ICs reaching out, asking for advice or whatever it is. Seems like everyone's pretty open to that. So yeah, I definitely want you all to don't be afraid to just reach out, build a new connection. And yeah, I'm excited for future programming. Thanks for your contributions, and thanks for all the words of wisdom.
Also, I know that there's some non-Asians in the mix here, so like, you don't have to be Asian to holler at us either. So like, feel free.
Thanks, Davidson.
Awesome. Thank you, Davidson.
Peace, guys.
Everyone.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.
Bye, guys.